Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Marlow York. I'm a self-published author, and today I wanted to talk about things that I've accomplished in 2019. I'm sure a lot of people on a lot of different channels have done this already, but I was inspired by Natalia Lee to do this video myself after watching her 2019 accomplishments video. And part of my goals for 2020 was to better manage my mental health, and one of those things was to start practicing gratitude. So I thought it made sense to actually look back on 2019 to just sort of acknowledge the things that I accomplished so that I could put sort of like, I don't know, just sort of like a positive spin, some positive vibes out there, and just kind of pat myself on the back for the things that I've accomplished. Social media and the internet tends to be a very negative place, so I don't think there's anything wrong with patting yourself on the back every now and then and just expressing some good things that have happened. So I went ahead and wrote some down on a sticky note, the things that came to mind right off the bat, and there might be some more that I'm forgetting that are worth mentioning, so if there are, then maybe I'll write them below in the description or flash them on the screen or something at the end of the video. And this is also something that I feel like my husband has said a lot. More than once, he's mentioned that we've accomplished so much stuff in a year or the last 2 years or even the last 10 years that it's just interesting to see how far we've come when we sort of look back on where we were last year or 5 years ago or when we were like teenagers. Some of these things are fairly big accomplishments and others are kind of small, and some of them are literally just things that only I give a crap about, but I wanted to mention them anyway because I'm proud of them. So one of the big things that happened at the beginning of this year was David and I had our wedding. And it was funny, I actually had to look up on my calendar if that in fact happened in 2019 because it was sort of a blur, and that was such a long time ago, it feels like. And also because we actually got married at the courthouse in November of 2018. So having the wedding itself was more just like a celebration rather than like, I don't know, the formal, this is you actually doing this thing, because we had already formally done it beforehand. We just wanted to do more of like the fun celebrating, family comes and celebrates with us sort of thing in May. And yeah, having a wedding, getting married in general, even if you have a small courthouse kind of thing, or if you have a big extravagant wedding, either way, it's a pretty big accomplishment. I actually do want to film a wedding tips video. I haven't quite decided what I'll call it or anything like that, but I wanted to use my experience from my own wedding and also weddings that I've been to give people tips on how to try to make it as inexpensive and stress-free as possible. So that's something to look forward to in the future. I haven't had a chance to film it because it will actually take some sitting down and writing notes so that I can make a coherent, concise video that would actually help some people. Another thing that I started doing at the beginning of this year was making my own garden. So I've been gardening since I was a little kid, super young, and just helping my grandparents in their gardens. They had a very big vegetable garden and they had multiple flower gardens, and I had flower gardens at my own house growing up, and I always helped with like yard work and stuff like that. But once I moved to California in 2015, I didn't have any space to build a real garden, like on a lawn or even in planters. I had a few small flower pots when I was living in California, but nothing that I would consider a garden and nothing that was really great. So shortly after we bought the house that we live in, I immediately knew that I wanted to turn some of the yard into a garden. And right now, I believe the plot is just 8 by 8 feet, so it's not really big. It's actually pretty small in terms of what I grew up working in. But I just love the fact that I made this garden with literally nothing but a shovel and my bare hands. Well, my gloved hands. But all I had was a shovel. I didn't have any big tools. I didn't have anything that was electric or anything. Digging up the yard was a huge pain. It took several weekends, so I ended up having to plant a lot of things later than I would. And since I'm used to gardening in New York's climate, and Utah's climate is very, very different, the garden itself did okay. It wasn't great. I did manage to harvest a few things, but not as much as I would have liked. I actually forced myself not to have super high expectations. I just wanted it to succeed in some way, and it did. So that's me very quickly trying to stop being negative about something and turn it into a positive. But it was very, very gratifying to start with nothing but a shovel and a plot of land and some seeds, and to actually grow plants and vegetables and flowers in my own yard. And it was definitely a learning experience, so I'm really excited to continue gardening this year because it's good for me as someone who loves being outside, working among the plants, among the wildlife and nature. And it's also just good for people in general to garden. So I can't wait to start doing that again this year. Another big thing that I did last year in 2019, which I mean, maybe it surprised some people that I didn't say it right off the bat, but I published my second book. I have it right here. If you're not familiar with Trail of Flames, if you haven't been here before and heard me talking about it, I try not to self-plug too much, but it's like, dude, I published my second book. Like, that's kind of cool. And ignore the stupid not for resale thing on here, but it's a really awesome thing to have published even one book. Publishing my second book is also exciting and a huge accomplishment, and yeah, I'm working on the third book in the series, and I have plenty of ideas for other books that I want to work on in the future, so yeah, that's pretty cool. Publishing a book. Pretty good accomplishment. Something else I started doing in 2019, I don't really know if I would call this like an accomplishment as in like completing something, but it's something that I did that I feel like is good, and that is I started going back to therapy. So I think I've mentioned this before, I think I mentioned it in my last video, my 2020 goals video, that I've been in and out of counseling / therapy, whatever you want to call it, for many years. I have mixed feelings about the whole thing, but generally speaking, therapy does work for a lot of people, and it's generally a good thing. 2019 for me was very difficult in terms of mental health, for a lot of reasons. Overall, 2019 was not a good mental health year for me. I think it was in November, I really realized that I need to do something and that trying to fix my mental health on my own is not working. So I figured I would go see a therapist again. And this time, it was a bit difficult because in the past, when I was in high school or when I was in college, you had mental health services on campus, so it was a very small location to find a potential therapist. But being out in the real world, you kind of have to shop around a bit, so to speak, and you have to also go to people that are, accepted by your insurance plan and reasonably close to the house, and so that was a bit of a struggle. But I found someone who's a bit different, like I guess their modality, if that's the right word, is a little bit different from therapists I've seen in the past. I don't really know exactly how to describe what type of therapist she is, but the way that she sort of described it to me is that she mixes Western and Eastern medicine in terms of her mental health approach, and most therapists that I've seen in the past were just, I guess, Western style, very by the book, not alternative or holistic in any way. They were just your sort of, I don't know, therapist, American therapist, whatever you want to call them. And since that hasn't really worked well for me in the past, I figured it might help to see someone who does have this holistic sort of alternative approach to things. And it's not like we sit there meditating and chanting or doing like really, like really out there kind of stereotypical stuff. But she has definitely helped me already to think of things in terms of mental health differently than I have in the past. I've only seen her, I think, 3 times so far, so I'm not going to say like this is a goal completed or anything, but I do think that it is an accomplishment to recognize when your mental health or your physical health isn't where it should be or where you want it to be, and that you need help and that you should seek help. So I think that's a pretty cool thing that I started doing in 2019. I feel like my hair is really staticky, so if you can see it like floating around, ignore it. Another thing that I accomplished in 2019 is I did get a raise at my day job. And this is something that at my work pretty much happens every year that you're employed. And I think that's the same for a lot of workplaces. So in some ways it doesn't really feel like an accomplishment, but I feel like for me it is, because it means that, I made it another year, or I've been an asset to the company for another year. And that does make me feel good, despite how being a workaholic has had a lot of negative effects on my mental and physical health. I do take great pride in being a good worker, whether that's at my day job or my writing career or anything that I consider work or an important task that requires effort, I take great pride in being good at it and being very dedicated. I mean, the money part is always nice because I listed it as I got a raise, but for me, it's more the satisfaction that I get personally from being recognized as being good at my job. They also do a yearly review, and they had a lot of good things to say about me, so it was really nice to be recognized for that by upper management, especially when you have a job like this where we all work on our own projects. And also, as someone who works remotely, my job is based in California, but I live in Utah, so there isn't a whole lot of daily reassurance that I'm doing the right thing, except what I can see on my own based on, just stuff that I can see from the resources that I have on hand on the computer, if that makes any sense. So it's one thing to feel like you're doing a good job, but to not really know for sure, but it's another thing entirely when your employer does say that you're doing a good job and they let you know and they give you a good review or something like that. So I feel like that's an accomplishment that I got a good review and I earned a raise. The next accomplishment on my list is, again, something that's kind of small and definitely personal, and other people might not get it, but it was important to me, and that is I took up biking again, like bicycling, riding a bicycle. And this might seem very small, like I said, to some people who don't care about riding a bike, but when I was growing up, riding a bike was like the way to get around, especially for me and my brother and some of my friends. A lot of us just walked everywhere because, when you're young, you don't have a car generally. But for me, I loved biking as a kid. I loved going fast and, taking my mountain bike off-road on some of the dirt roads in my hometown. It feels really good when you're trying to get up a really steep hill, you're working as hard as you can, and your legs are burning and it hurts, but you finally make it to the top without having to get off and walk. So that to me was always so much fun as a kid. I loved biking, and I didn't really do it much when I lived in California for a few reasons. I eventually did buy a bike, I think my second or third year living in California, I can't exactly remember. But the thing is that living where I did in San Diego, every place was so crowded and had so much traffic that I was afraid of biking on these city streets, because where I grew up is extremely rural, so I didn't have to fight with traffic or stay in certain lanes, and it was just very overwhelming and scary for me to bike in San Diego. But now that I live in a more suburban area where it's a bit safer for me to bike and makes me less nervous, I got my bike out. I think it was back in the late spring, definitely when it was warm enough to be outside biking at like 6 in the morning. And that first day that I got back on my bike, I didn't even really have a plan for where I was going. I just wanted to go, and I just, biked up to the main road and just started going, and it was so peaceful, and it was still mostly dark, but the sun was kind of starting to rise. And I just remember biking past these horse pastures, and like the cold air was blowing in my face, and the sun was starting to rise or kind of like glow on the mountains. And I just remember thinking that it was so peaceful and fun, and I finally felt like I wasn't trapped in suburbia or trapped in a city or just surrounded by so many people and so much traffic and noise and weird smells and other things that you find in a city, that for this like split second I felt like I was sort of back home in the country where there wasn't all this human tornado surrounding me. I could just bike and have fun and just feel like I was very free and riding my bike so fast down these hills, and it was just really invigorating. And even if my legs started to hurt, my knees started to act up, I didn't mind because I was finally enjoying myself. And honestly, I don't really enjoy myself very often or feel joy and happiness. And that's common. You can't be happy all the time, but getting back on my bike and just biking to some quiet road with a horse pasture and mountains and just the sounds of animals in the early morning, and it just felt really good. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to paint this silly picture, but at the end of it, it was really good, and it felt good, and it was fun. And I ended up making it a weekly habit to bike in the morning as part of a workout, but it was nice to just get away from the house and to just kind of be out on my own for a little while. So that's something I definitely want to do again in the spring and summer and fall, and it's really disappointing that it's winter now, so I can't get my bike out. I mean, I could, but I don't really want to bike when it's 20 degrees and pitch black and there's ice, you know, I'm not gonna do that. So it looks like that's pretty much all I have on my list. And of course, like I said in the beginning of this video, there's probably some things, some accomplishments that I'm forgetting. So I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a complete list or an extensive list, or that I only accomplished 6 things in 2019, because there's definitely some smaller things that I did that made me feel good or made me feel proud of myself in some way. I was gonna add baking to the list, but I kind of didn't because I'm not really sure if it's like an accomplishment. I'll just mention it. Let's just tack it on to the end here to really mess up my video. I don't bake very often or consistently at this point, but I did bake a few times, especially around the holidays when like all our neighbors were exchanging things and giving us things, and so I wanted to repay them because a lot of our neighbors have been really nice to us ever since we moved here. I have a very, very easy bread recipe that I've baked several times. I would like to film a future video that incorporates that, but again, gonna hold off on that. I also baked a little bit around the holidays, like I said, for like Thanksgiving and Christmas. I think I made some things that I haven't made in a while. I don't know if I would consider this a big accomplishment because I don't really do it that often because we don't like to have a lot of sweets in the house. And if I'm baking things, sure, I have plenty of neighbors I can give it to and they readily accept it. But it was nice to bake a few things and to finally, once again, get back to my roots and doing something that I loved so much as a kid and growing up, and things that I enjoyed back home with my grandparents. And baking is something I'd like to do more in the future, but it might just have to be an every now and then kind of thing because, like I said, we don't want a lot of junk food sitting around the house. So yeah. Alright, now I'm actually going to call this the end of the video. We had 6, kind of 7 things that I feel like I accomplished in 2019. And like I said, if I forgot anything, I'll like write it in the description if something happens to come to mind between me filming this video right now and posting it, I don't know, next week or whenever I end up posting this. Definitely comment below some of the things that you accomplished in 2019. No matter how big or small, if you had some really big accomplishments that you're super proud of and you really want to let me or other people know about, feel free to put them below. But even if you had some small things, you know, like my gardening or my baking and biking, if you have any like small, more personal things that you feel like were an accomplishment that maybe some other people wouldn't quite understand, then feel free to comment those as well. I'd definitely like to see what you guys feel like you accomplished and some goals that you met in 2019. If you'd like to keep up with me on my writing endeavors, I'll leave my social media links below in the description, as well as links to my published novels Blood of Fire and Trail of Flames. So until next time, see ya!